From the highest mountains to the driest deserts, every culture on earth has a story about its beginning. But what's fascinating and what we are exploring today is how many cultures have a story about its end, or at least a near end. An event so catastrophic, it wiped the slate clean. And more often than not, that event involved water, a world drowning flood. Welcome to Roots and Realities. I'm your host, Manu Nellutla, and this is the podcast where we dig into the stories that shape us and the truths that ground them. Today, we are embarking on a global journey to explore one of humanity's most persistent and powerful narratives, the Great Flood. We will be asking, why is this story everywhere? From the Fertile Crescent to the Australian outback, from the Andes to the Arctic. Are these just tales of divine anger and human survival? Or are they echoes of real catastrophes? Are these myths a form of ancestral memory, encoding geological and climatic events that reshaped the world our ancestors knew? I will be your guide as we journey continent by continent with the modern reality of science. So, grab your life raft and let's dive in. It feels right to start where civilization itself took root, in Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. This is modern day Iraq, part of Asia. But the story that emerged here would profoundly shape European and Western thought for a millennia. Most of us know the story of Noah from the book of Genesis. God, displeased with humanity's wickedness, sends a flood to cleanse the earth. He instructs one righteous man, Noah, to build a massive ark and save his family and pairs of every animal. Then the rain falls for 40 days and 40 nights, with waters covering everything. And humanity gets a second chance, sealed with the promise of a rainbow. It's a powerful story of morality and rebirth. But it wasn't the first of its kind in the region. Long before the Hebrew scribes wrote Genesis, the Sumerians and Babylonians told a similar tale in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In that story, the hero is Utnapishtim. Here, the gods decide to destroy humanity. But the god Ea warns Utnapishtim in a dream, telling him to build a boat. The parallels are undeniable. A divine warning, a chosen builder, a vessel of salvation, the saving of animals, even sending out birds to find dry land. This powerful resemblance suggests a shared cultural memory. So, where did it come from? The answer, it seems, lies buried in the very soil of Mesopotamia. The landscape is defined by its two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, both powerful, unpredictable forces that produced catastrophic floods. Archaeologists like Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1920s excavated the city of Ur and found a 10-foot thick layer of river deposited silt dating back to 4000 BCE. While not evidence of a global flood, but for the people who experienced it, it would be a flood that submerged their entire known world, and that could be the end of the world for them. There is also an even more dramatic theory, the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. Around 7,500 years ago, the Black Sea was a smaller freshwater lake. As the glaciers melted, the rising Mediterranean Sea breached the Bosporus Strait, creating a waterfall 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls that poured into the Black Sea basin. People living in those fertile lowlands would have seen the sea rising by a foot a day, forcing them to flee with a terrifying story of a vengeful sea that swallowed their world. A story that, over generations, could easily become the myth we know today. From Mesopotamia region, let's go across to the North America. Flood stories are present in virtually every indigenous tradition here. But a particularly powerful one comes from the Anishinaabe peoples of the Great Lakes region. This is the story of Turtle Island. The story goes that the creator, Gichi Manidu, was displeased and the world was destroyed by a massive flood sent by the Great Serpent. Only a handful of beings survived, floating on a log or a raft. There was no land, just an endless ocean. The hero, Nanabozo, asks for a volunteer to dive down and bring back a piece of the original earth. After many of them fail, a humble muskrat makes the dive. It returns to the surface lifeless, but clutched in its tiny paw was a small bit of soil. Nanabozo places that soil on the back of a turtle and breathes life into it. And that magically grows and grows, becoming the new land, North America. It's a beautiful story of sacrifice, humility, and recreation. And what's incredible is that the science points to a real world event that mirrors this myth with stunning accuracy. At the end of the last ice age, about 11,000 years ago, North America was home to an immense body of meltwater called Lake Agassiz. And when I say immense, I mean larger than all the Great Lakes combined, held in place by dams made of ice. When those ice dams broke, the result was a flood of biblical proportions. The final drainage of Lake Agassiz released a volume of water equivalent of draining all the Great Lakes in the region within a matter of months. The ancestors of the Anishinaabe would have witnessed this. The wall of water would have washed their world that they were so used to. The idea of a new earth emerging as the waters recede isn't just a metaphor, it's a geological memory. From that interesting story from the Great Lakes region, now let's go to the Great Mountains, traveling south to the Andes. The Inca and pre-Incan cultures had a profound connections to the sky and water, reflected in their flood myth, the Unu Pachacuti, which translates to water that overturns the land and time. The story says the creator god Viracocha, unhappy with his first creation, unleashed a great flood that rained down for 60 days and 60 nights. Only two people, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, were saved, both of them surviving in a wooden box. After the flood, Viracocha wandered this desolate land, creating new people from clay. The flood here seems to look towards a cosmic reset button. When we look for a force capable of enacting such a reset in the Andes, all signs point to one powerful recurring climatic phenomena, El Nino. We know El Nino as a weather pattern, but its effects are most accurate on the coasts of Peru and Ecuador. During a strong El Nino year, warm water brings devastating rainfall and mega floods to this arid region. The geological core samples and archaeological sites show evidence of repeated catastrophic flooding events going back thousands of years. A super El Nino would wash away villages and turn deserts into lakes. For the people on the ground, it would be indistinguishable from a divine punishment, the sky god crying or raging. The Uno Pachacuti could very well be a cultural memory of the most powerful El Nino event in their history. We have talked about the Mesopotamia, then we went to North America, and from there we went to the Andes region. Now let's go to Asia, this time to China, where we find a flood myth with a fascinating twist. Most of these stories are about surviving a flood. The Chinese myth is about taming it through human ingenuity. This is the story of Yu the Great. This legend, which is central to the founding of China's first dynasty, the Xia, tells of a great flood that raged for generations. The emperor appointed a man named Gun to solve it, but his dams and dikes failed. So Gun's son, Yu, was appointed. Yu learned from his father's failure, so instead of blocking the water, he worked with it. For 13 years, he traveled the land, dredging new river channels and canals to guide the floodwaters out to the sea. His success was so great that he was hailed as a hero and became the first emperor of the Xia dynasty. For centuries, this was considered pure myth until science weighed in. In 2016, a team of geologists found evidence of a massive outburst flood on the Yellow River, which dates back to 1920 BCE. A huge landslide had dammed the river, and when that natural dam broke, it released a flood of unimaginable scale. The timing of this geological event lines up almost perfectly with the traditional dating for the story of Yu the Great. The myth, it seems, is a political charter and a cultural memory of one of the greatest engineering challenges of the ancient world. While this theme of a single chosen survivor, warned of a coming deluge and tasked with preserving life, finds another powerful voice just within that Asiatic region on the Indian subcontinent. The story of Manu and the fish Matsya is one of the cornerstones of Hindu mythology. It begins with a sage, the first man, named Manu, who was washing his hands in a river. A tiny fish swims into his cupped hands and pleads for protection from the larger fish that were trying to eat it. Taking pity on the fish, Manu places it in a small clay jar. Overnight, the fish grows too large for the jar. Manu moves it to a pond, and then to a lake, and then to the mighty Ganges River. But each time, the fish miraculously outgrows its home. Finally, Manu releases the massive fish into the ocean. It is then that the fish reveals its true identity, that it is Matsya, an avatar of the great god Vishnu. He warns Manu that in 7 days, a great flood, a pralaya, will come to dissolve the universe. Matsya instructs Manu to build a large boat and to take aboard the 7 primordial sages, the Saptarishi, along with the seeds of every plant and one of every type of animal. When the devastating rains begin and oceans rise, Manu and his precious cargo are adrift on these churning waters. As promised, Matsya appears, now in the shape of a colossal fish with a single horn. Manu ties his ship to the horn using the great serpent Vasuki as a rope, and the divine fish guides them safely through the storm, finally resting the boat atop the highest peak of the Himalayas as the world below disappears. From this arc of survival, the world is repopulated. So, what real world events could have inspired this epic tale? In India, probably the answer is written in the sky and carved by the rivers: the monsoon. The Indian monsoon is one of the most powerful weather systems on the planet, a seasonal reversal of winds that bring life giving rain, but also has the capacity for immense destruction. The great river systems of the Indus and the Ganges have histories of catastrophic flooding, of shifting their courses by miles and wiping out entire settlements in the process. A memory of a particularly devastating monsoon season could easily be elevated to a world ending event. Furthermore, the Indian subcontinent has a vast coastline vulnerable to tsunamis and powerful cyclones. A cataclysmic coastal event like the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami provides a terrifyingly real template for a story of the ocean rising to swallow the land. The myth of Manu and Matsya likely weaves together the recurring reality of monsoonal floods with the acute trauma of coastal catastrophes. From the Indian subcontinent, let's go to the vast continent of Africa. I want to focus on a myth from the Yoruba people of West Africa, which deals not just with a river, but with the ocean itself. The story centers on Olokun, the Orisha of the deep sea. In a fit of jealousy against the sky god, Olokun decides to drown the world, sending massive waves, a giant tsunami, to destroy the surface. The people cry out, and another Orisha, or god, must intervene to chain Olokun at the bottom of the sea to stop this destruction. Now, this story is a powerful reminder of the ocean's latent power. And this is key to understanding the reality in Africa, which contains both predictable, life-giving floods, like the Nile's annual inundation, and the raw, unpredictable power of the Atlantic coast. While not as common as in the Pacific, submarine landslides off the coast of West Africa can trigger massive tsunamis. A coastal community experiencing such an event, a wall of water from a calm sea, would have no other explanation than the mythical proportions of rage of a sea god. The myth of Olokun encodes a deep respect for and fear of the ocean's power. And for our final stop of today's episode, we head to Oceania. The flood stories here are some of the oldest and in many ways the most scientifically prescient. They operate on a completely different time scale. We're not talking about 40 days or 60 days of rain, but generations of change. Aboriginal stories from across Australia describe a former time when coastlines were further out. Polynesian stories tell of entire islands, like the mythical Hawaii, being lost to the sea. These aren't stories of a single rapid flood. They are chronicles of inundation. And this is where the science is just breathtaking. At the end of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, sea level was about 120 meters or 400 feet lower than what it is today. Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania were all one single landmass called Sahul. As the ice melted over thousands of years, the sea began to rise. There were periods of rapid meltwater pulses where the sea would rise dramatically in a one single human lifetime. The people who lived on those ancient coastlines would have been forced to move inland generation after generation. They would have watched as their hunting grounds, their sacred sites, and their world were slowly but surely swallowed by the great ocean and the rising water from that. The stories they passed down of lands now underwater, of channels forming between islands, aren't myths in the fantastical sense. They are eyewitness accounts, oral histories of post glacial sea level rise, preserved for over 10,000 years. It's perhaps the most direct link between ancient story and geological reality we have. So, from the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the rising coast of Australia, the flood is everywhere, or shall we call the flood myths are everywhere. What we have seen today is that these myths are not just copies of one another, they are unique stories born from unique experiences. They reflect the very real and very different ways that water could threaten and remake a people's world. Some are memories of catastrophic river floods, others are glacial dam bursts. Some encode the cyclical terror of El Nino, while the other chronicle the slow, inexorable rise of the sea itself. These stories are a testament to our resilience, but also to our vulnerability. They are humanity's oldest cautionary tales, passed down through millennia, reminding us that the world we know is not permanent. The forces of nature are vastly more powerful than we are. They are the roots of our deepest anxieties and the realities that have shaped our species for thousands of years. Thank you for joining me on Roots and Realities. I am Manu Nellutla. I hope you enjoyed today's theme and the topic. And if you want to listen to more topics like this, please do follow and subscribe this channel. And please do join the conversation on our social media channels on Instagram. Until next time, stay curious.